What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review the season 1 premiere of The Idol, which dropped tonight on HBO. And this is a show that I've been eagerly looking forward to for a while because I like director Sam Levinson quite a bit. I thought Euphoria season 2 was his best work to date. But also, this show has been at the center of, or has been embroiled in all these insane controversies, both behind the scenes in terms of different filmmakers leaving the project and like doing an 80% reshoot and a total creative overhaul. But then you had all these crazy reviews coming out of the Cannes Film Festival where some people were describing it as sexual torture porn. I'm like, all right, either you don't know what that means or the show's going to be completely deranged. And obviously HBO is no stranger to on-screen gratuitous nudity. I mean, maybe like 10, 15 years ago, HBO was kind of famous for it. I mean, shows like True Blood or Rome or The Sopranos or Game of Thrones, Deadwood, Boardwalk Empire, even season 1 of Westworld, all these shows had some pretty outrageous sexuality, and I feel like that was part of like the draw. That was the bait that lured people in, and then you got rewarded on occasion with a good show, with good writing and good directing and good acting and that sort of thing. And I think the reality is that it's too early to say whether or not The Idol is going to join that camp or join that club of really good, provocative, kind of, wildly sexual HBO content. But at a minimum, it's got my curiosity. I'm interested. I mean, I found some of the acting to be a little wooden, and I found some of the dialogue to be a little kind of clunky. However, at a minimum, it's got style, and it's got style to spare, and it's got a great cast and a fun topic. I mean, you have a pop star trying to make a comeback, and this strange kind of dangerous guru who's getting into her head and trying to influence her. And I feel like it's got all the potential in the world. And when I see the critical community just kind of, reaching for their pearls, to borrow a cliche phrase, and just freaking out about a show before even like audiences have even really had a chance to kind of digest it or process it. And I guess my first instinct is to go in the opposite direction. And I guess I should just go ahead and admit my own personal bias. But when I hear people freaking out about something in advance, I kind of make up my mind to like it in advance the same way so many people seem to make up their minds to dislike it in advance. I heard people talking about, Lily Rose Depp as a Nepo baby and all this stuff. And I was like, wait a second. Hollywood for the last 120 years has been littered with Nepo babies. I mean, Drew Barrymore and Bridget Fonda. I mean, like the list goes on and on and on. Or Jane Fonda. I mean, if you were to throw out all the Nepo babies, you throw out like half of like the actors working in Hollywood. For me, a Nepo baby, they might get their foot in the door a little quicker than other actors, but they still have to step up and deliver. And if Lily Rose Depp is unable to carry the burden of a show, well then let the audience decide, and they will throw her aside very, very quickly if she's not packing the gear, as my grandfather used to like to say. So I'm going to give this show a chance. And I think the first episode, at a minimum, it wasn't boring. We're surrounded by so much boring cinema and so many boring shows that are vanilla, shows that play it safe, shows that run away from risk. And at least The Idol feels like the work of an auteur. It feels like the work of filmmakers who are trying to give us a really provocative, exciting experience. And so for that, I'm just going to say thank you to everybody involved. And the jury is still out whether or not the show will manage to completely deliver on all of its promise. But at a minimum, I should say, if you love Euphoria, and I know Euphoria's got legions of fans, I mean millions of people watch that show. Well, The Idol takes place in the same fictional setting, takes place in the same kind of shared universe. So if you like Euphoria, then check out The Idol. And if you don't like it, don't watch it. Like, no harm, no foul. HBO will survive. HBO's been on this crazy hot streak since last fall between House of the Dragon and White Lotus and The Last of Us and season 4 of Succession. They've been going from strength to strength. Whether or not The Idol can sustain that momentum, like I said, I am curious, and I'm not going to make up my mind until I see a few more episodes, but I will say this. First episode was a turn on, and it wasn't remotely, what's that term they used earlier? Sexual torture porn, and that is ridiculous. Lily Rose Depp shows her nipples a few times, like, oh my God, like how are we going to survive this experience? I mean, for me, when somebody says sexual torture porn, that sounds like something out of like, Videodrome. I mean, it sounds like something truly disgusting and depraved. And I feel like once you cry wolf and use that kind of terminology, and if it is in fact not like contained or presented in the show, well, I feel like then you lose all credibility if that's how you're going to describe a show like this. And also, I want to reach out to these critics and just shake them and say, have A24 and HBO not earned a little credit in the bank at this point? I mean, think about all the incredible flicks that A24 has put out over the last 10 years, or all these absolute all-time classic shows that HBO has put out over the last 40 years. If we can't trust them to have the taste and integrity to deliver a cool show, well, I don't know who we can trust. So once again, I just find the whole critical community to be completely, totally absurd and ridiculous at times. But let's try and zero in on the show itself and review it, if possible, in an objective way. Obviously, I'm biased. I kind of made up my mind in advance to be in this show's camp, but I will acknowledge its flaws while also calling attention to the ingredients that I liked. So let's start with the most obvious thing. I am way too old to be talking about pop music. I mean, the only time in my life where I was really into pop music was when I was 8 years old, when Michael Jackson's Thriller had just come out and Madonna was big. I mean, my cultural reference points are decades in the past. I love cinema, I love TV, I love books, I love great writing, I love the dramatic arts. But when it comes to pop music, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But I trust The Weeknd to know what the fuck he's talking about. My only exposure to The Weeknd so far was in the movie Uncut Gems by the Safdie brothers, which I loved. Yet another A24 project. And I was like, all right, he's a cool persona. He can obviously sing his ass off. Let's give him a chance and see if he can act. And I've seen Lily Rose Depp in a few movies, but this is the first time where I've seen her really front and center. And obviously, yeah, she is sexy beyond words. She can do the moves, she can do the dances, she can do the choreography. And I know some people are going to find it depraved or gross or whatever, the fact that Sam Levinson kind of lovingly were going for slow motion shots in her butt cheeks as she slaps them. But pop music is supposed to be sexy. I mean, Madonna, she was one of the most crazy sexual icons of the 80s and 90s and helped open people's eyes to all sorts of new experiences and possibilities and whatnot. And I feel like if you're not allowed to be sexy with pop music, when are you allowed to acknowledge that, I'm belaboring the obvious at this point and starting to repeat myself. But the main drama of this first episode is that the character Jocelyn, played by Lily Rose Depp, she's been a little bit out of action for a while. Her mother died of cancer, and some people are saying that she had an emotional breakdown or a psychotic breakdown, or she was suffering from exhaustion. But anyway, she's been out of the scene for a while, and she's about to stage a comeback. She's about to go on tour. Ticket sales are light. She's about to drop her new single, and she's working on her choreography, working on her album cover, and she's just juggling all the flaming batons that a pop star has to juggle on a daily basis. But she's not completely sold on the song. She's not completely in love with it. And we're just basically watching her try to push back on all of her handlers and managers and agents and all the people that are constantly telling her what to do, what kind of music she should do, how she should kind of present herself. And I thought it was actually kind of a fascinating glimpse inside 24 hours of somebody who drinks hard, still loves to screw, has wild and crazy friends. But I immediately found her character to be compelling. She's very confident. She knows what kind of image or persona she's trying to craft. And we see her very successfully kind of navigating two big obstacles or two big controversies very early in the episode. One, somebody has posted a picture online of her looking up at a camera and there's cum all over her face. And she just kind of shrugs it off. She could not be bothered. Everybody around her is in hysterics, freaking out. They're worried whether or not this is going to impact the ticket sales for a tour and all this other stuff. But she just refuses to let it get to her in any way, shape, or form. But the other problem, which she deals with very successfully, but she's in the middle of a photo shoot for her new album cover, and there's this intimacy coordinator on the set who's kind of getting in her way, and he's basically, from the intimacy coordinator's point of view, he's trying to make a nice, safe photo shoot, and he wants to make sure that all of her needs are addressed and that no one's exploiting her, no one's taking advantage of her, or no one's asking her to show something that she doesn't want to show. But here we have a pop star who's basically saying, I want to show my boobs on the album cover. It's my album, my music, doing it my way. And eventually her manager, played by Hank Azaria, has to just take the intimacy coordinator and lock him in a bathroom and pay somebody a couple grand to keep the door closed. But it's one of the situations where somebody who presumes to be protecting her is actually standing in her way creatively. And I feel like this is fun terrain to explore in a show. And who knows, maybe one of the reasons why so many critics immediately push back on the show is that they feel like the show very clearly and very deliberately, through its cast and its writers and its director, are trying to push back on a lot of new cultural norms that have kind of been foisted upon and or embraced by Hollywood in recent years. And that makes people feel uncertain. It makes people feel nervous. And I like the idea that this show is going to go its own way and that it's not afraid to question the assumptions or the conventional wisdom of Hollywood at large. So it's called being a maverick or an iconoclast. And I always respond to iconoclastic filmmakers, especially when you see how the lights and the crew and everything's already been paid for, but the intimacy coordinator is going to say that they need to stop for 48 hours to rewrite some contract and then get back together. And then he tells the manager, that's the price of safety. And he says it with such certitude and such certainty. In any event, it felt like a very refreshingly honest portrayal of Hollywood trying to navigate the new sexual and cultural norms that maybe not every filmmaker or actor or performer or pop star have necessarily signed on the dotted line for or totally on board with. Also, I'm a sucker for kind of sleazy stories about showbiz or Hollywood in general, the music industry, and we get some great scenes where characters played by Jane Addams and Eli Roth are talking about what the music business used to be like. And Jane Addams' character Nikki has some great lines, like when she tells the intimacy coordinator, stop trying to cock block America, which I think is a line that we should all start using on a more regular basis. And she's basically trying to justify the shoot, saying that they're making mental illness feel really sexy again. And then she tells all these great stories about how she used to have anal sex in the stairwell at Capitol Records and then walk into a meeting and Eli Roth was like, yeah, I was the guy having sex with you, etc. and so forth. They're very deliberately trying to push people's buttons, but in an era where everything feels so safe and so boring, it's just a relief to see some actors speaking in a very frank, honest, kind of shocking, provocative fashion. And then the show seems to find an extra gear when Jocelyn goes out to a club that night. And what I liked about her club experience is that you definitely got the sense that there are dangerous individuals on the fringe. There's this one skinhead dude, no harm, no foul. I'm not offended by the negative depiction of a skinhead in the show, but he's got something like "Life is War" tattooed on his head. You're like, all right, that's a little unusual, but you've got people drinking and taking shots and dancing and all that stuff, but there just seem to be some unusually sketchy individuals on the scene, kind of just sizing people up, almost like they're setting people up for a crime or to recruit them for a cult or whatever the case might be. I'm not quite sure what their deal is. But it's here where we meet the character Tedros, played by The Weeknd, and he immediately starts getting in Jocelyn's head, and they have an immediate kind of affinity and an immediate rapport and an immediate sexual attraction. And they have a pretty hot scene in this stairwell with all these red lights when they're kind of fondling and kissing and touching and that sort of thing. And I think while The Weeknd, he might be inexperienced as an actor, but he has one really cool scene where he's talking about just the power of pop music and talking about how if Prince's tune "When Doves Cry" came out today, it'd be a hit tomorrow. I was like, yeah, you know what? I fucking agree. I remember when I was a kid when that song came out and it took over. It's a kick-ass tune. Then he starts describing how pop music is the ultimate Trojan horse. It gets people singing, gets people dancing, and he just talks about how powerful it is. But when a pop song really gets its hooks into people, you can sneak subversive messages and hidden meanings and that sort of thing in. And some people might look down upon pop music or think it's easily discarded or whatever the case might be, but think about from the 50s up through the present day, just how many pop tunes just never go away and they just keep coming back in movies and shows and they're always on the radio, etc. and so forth. And it might be kind of thin and superficial at times, but there's no denying that pop is pure style, and when a song really leans into and finds that special style, well, you can quite literally change the world. But when she gets home, we get our first taste of just how kind of edgy the sexuality of the show is going to be, where Jocelyn leans back on the couch, spreads her legs, begins to masturbate while choking herself. And I know that's going to be an uncomfortable scene for some people, but guess what? A lot of people are into that, and I feel like when you start making judgments about what people are into sexually, I feel like you get into very slippery terrain. Life is short, and somebody has figured out what they're into or how to get off. I'm not going to judge them, and I feel like, more power to her. She knows what she likes. And it's toward the end of the episode where we realize that Jocelyn is not sold on the merits or the quality of her new single, and she's asking for honest opinions from her best friend / assistant, played by the very funny Rachel Sennett, who I first discovered in Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. I think Rachel Sennett is funny as fucking shit, and I'm thrilled that she's part of this show. Apparently she was added to the show after the big creative overhaul, which I think was a masterstroke on their part. But they're watching Basic Instinct. Once again, scores big points with me. I fucking love Basic Instinct. I love Paul Verhoeven. I love that movie. But they're talking about the song, whether or not it's any good. And that's when Jocelyn announces that she's going to be inviting Tedros over for the evening. She wants to get it on, and she also wants to get his opinion about the song. And she figures he's just enough of a dirtbag and an asshole where he will give her an honest assessment of the tune. And the way Jocelyn gets prepared for his arrival. I mean, she gets into this really slinky red dress where on the back you have this kind of, I don't know, like black lace that reveals her buttocks and whatnot. Anyway, she looks fucking incredible. And they sit down and she wants Tedros' opinion. She plays the tune and he tells her, look, you've got a hit. It's a cool song. However, when you're talking about how you're a freak and you're this and you're that, like, I don't believe it. And he calls attention to Donna Summer. And he says, when Donna Summer sang songs about screwing, like she sang like she knew how to screw. She sang like she knew how to fuck. Like you believed it. And we get this interesting seduction scene where first it starts out relatively innocent, where like Tedros is rubbing ice cubes between her legs as he's giving her advice and that sort of thing. And then it gets a little bit, off the beaten path because he puts her dress over her head, starts choking her with the sash. And this is where it gets super shady. Tells her to trust him, pulls out a knife, tells her to open her mouth, and he creates a hole in the dress and says, now you can sing. I was like, wow, all right. That is a controversial, provocative moment. Bring it on. Give me more. And judging from the teaser for what's to come and just judging where I think the show is going to go, I'm assuming that they re-record the vocals that night and that she's going to have a single that she's really proud of, and that's going to help launch her into the stratosphere, and that due to the influence of this very shady character, at least at the beginning, she's going to enjoy a big surge of fame and success, and I imagine the show will get increasingly dark from there. And so as far as getting me hooked on the show is concerned, mission accomplished. I mean, do I think it's as good of a premiere as a show like Deadwood? No. Is it as good as the premiere of a show like Succession? No. But goddamn, like at a minimum, it's going to give us something to talk about for the next couple of weeks. And I hope it goes completely, totally over to the dark side. Like the summertime is so dominated by like kind of sugary popcorn flicks and roller coaster movies that are all kind of family friendly entertainment. We need a mean and nasty story about a pop star who's willing to go to the sleazy side in order to sell a few records. So I don't know what the original kind of intentions of what the show were, but apparently about 80% of the show was reshot, and one of the main directors on the show was asked to leave, and then Sam Levinson was asked to kind of take the creative reins at the direction of The Weeknd. So if people don't like The Weeknd, or people don't like Sam Levinson, or they don't like Lily Rose Depp, more power to them. But so far I've seen absolutely nothing to justify all the shock and outrage over the show. And like I said before, Sam Levinson, HBO, A24, all these people, they have a lot of credit in the bank, and I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt and plenty of rope to hang themselves with. And even if this show turns into a total bomb or a total spectacle or a total failure, I like big swings. I like filmmakers who take big risks. And Sam Levinson, you can see the evolution and growth that he's been going through as a filmmaker. Like when I saw Assassination Nation a couple of years ago, and I thought the beginning was pretty interesting, but that the movie just kind of fell off a cliff. But by a couple of years later, he'd gotten so much better. And I don't know if he'll ever be on the level of his dad, Barry Levinson. I mean, his dad's a fucking legend. I mean, movies like Diner and The Natural and Rain Man and Bugs. I mean, Barry Levinson in the 80s and 90s, he was a player. He was a major force in Hollywood. But goddamn, Sam Levinson is well on his way. And in an era where so many movies and shows have this atmosphere or this feeling of almost like a substitute teacher, it's like wagging its finger in disapproval at the audience and like telling us what we're allowed to say and what we're not allowed to say, or what we're allowed to read and not read, etc. and so forth. I just like the fact that Sam Levinson is just pushing back in his own ways. Like, you know what? I'm going to make my movies and my shows my way, and if you don't like it, go fuck yourself. So on that note, I'm going to wrap up this video. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell, and hunt me down on Twitter @GeekinOut. But I hope everybody has an amazing week. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.